All right. Hey, guys, welcome to the Vision Gathering. Thanks for tuning in. We're excited to be able to share with you what God's done in the past and what we believe He's doing in the present, and also what we envision Him doing in the future. Again, it's not the Vision Gathering that we expected. It's a little bit awkward. You guys are sitting on your couches. We're sitting in an empty room. And by God's grace, we're upbeat and excited, not because of the things that we're normally excited about. To be honest, we're grieving because we missed out on BWP. Normally, we would have had a packed out room in December with tons of stories of God's grace, people getting baptized. We likely would have been in a building. We would have had a full building. We would have been able to report exciting numerical growth. But what God did is He took a stick of dynamite and He blew up our plans. And what God does when He kills something is He likes to bring something else in its place that was far better. So we believe that Jesus is on the throne, that He's been in control this whole time, and that He's the God of resurrection. So when there's death, we expect new life. And what we've been seeing in the Gospel of Matthew this entire semester is we've been seeing God take very small things, and we've been seeing that He takes what's small and unnoticed by many, and He says that His kingdom is like that. So let me bring up one example that we didn't really touch down in our teaching series, but it's the parable of the mustard seed. So in Matthew 13, starting with verse 31, it says that Jesus presented another parable to them. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. It's the smallest of all the seeds, but when it's grown, it's taller than the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the sky come and nest in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and mixed into 50 pounds of flour until all of it was leavened. And so what we're excited that God has done and is doing, and what we expect Him to continue to do, is He is changing us from the inside out in a very small way. And what God has refocused both Jordan and I on that we're excited about is that God is at work in the unnoticed things, that He's at work in the corners of people's hearts. And I think one thing that He's doing in my life that I'm super humbled by and excited about is that I think God is just making me a less angry, more loving, kind, patient person. And that's happening in a slow process of sanctification as I work through my own frustrations with COVID, and as I work through my own pain related to the circumstances of my own family and my own disappointments in our church. But I think what's emerging in me is a new life of trust and patience and excitement about what God's doing in individual people's lives. And so I think this vision gathering isn't like, oh, wow, we can see past COVID into the future of this expansive, big thing that God is going to do in our church. But I think that we're asking that His kingdom would come in the lives of individual people. And as that is happening, we're excited that what's emerging in the life of our church is a more ready people to impact those around us for Christ. And I think one of the ways that I'm most excited about this reality, this emerging reality, has been connected to Jordan's emerging role in our church as a teaching and equipping pastor and what he is seeing God do. And so we've always said from the beginning of Salt City that we're a church family that loves college students. And I think Jordan's role is allowing us to be a church family that continues to love our city. And what we mean specifically when we say city is the young professionals in our midst and the people that are going out into our city and working on a daily basis and impacting those around them. So I would love to hear Jordan talk about what he's seen God do and what he is looking forward to God doing in our equipping ministry.
Yeah, so even to clarify, as I'm newer to being on the Salt City side of ministry here in our church, my primary job, other than teaching on Sundays, is with our connection groups and our connection group leaders, and then what we're doing for equipping. And so I wanted to give you some updates on what's going on in those worlds. So the first one I want to talk about is connection groups. And all of us know that we have not been able to gather as the visible body in the same way that we have been in the past. But something that's been so encouraging to me is that Salt City Church keeps meeting throughout the week, and it's in the form of connection groups. And I think what this moment has clarified for us is how central and important our connection groups are to who we are as a church. And what we've seen is those numbers, even in connection groups, haven't really changed that much. You guys, on the whole, are still deeply involved in the life of our ministry, even if you're not able to come on Sundays. And that has been really encouraging and actually models the New Testament. Part of our church model is based on Acts 2, which talks about the large corporate gatherings, but the primary way that the church meets together is in houses, over meals, talking about life and praying for each other and encouraging each other in their faith in really difficult times. That's what the early church did. And so I think what this moment has done is actually helped us look more like a New Testament model church, and we're really thankful for that. And I actually just finished reading a book by Rosaria Butterfield, who we've both been really influenced by, and she talked about in her life just the radical hospitality that she has. And I was so compelled by that because I think that's always been something that I've wanted for my life personally, for a church that I'm a part of, where it's really normal for people to integrate themselves into each other's lives, and for this reality of consistent touch points throughout the week to be part of what it means to be involved in the life of the church. And obviously that's been different with COVID, but I think God is establishing those rhythms for us as a church where we're learning to rely on those small groups a little bit more than we even have in the past. And that's growth for us. And that's a really beautiful thing that God is doing. And I'm encouraged by that and wanted to publicly say to our connection group leaders, thank you. Because this has not been an easy moment to lead. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for sticking with it. And if you're in a connection group, please encourage your connection group leaders. Tell them how God has used them in your life. And the other thing I wanted to thank all of you for is you have been unified as a church. The scriptures talk about how the dividing wall of hostility has been torn down, and I think I used to think that meant that we all naturally agreed on everything and kind of sat around singing Kumbaya and everything was great. But I think I've learned that unity a lot of the time is hard fought, where there's maybe disagreements or differences in opinions on how to navigate a moment. But out of love and respect for each other, you lay down some of your preferences and opinions for the benefit of other people. And I've watched you guys do that. And connection groups have navigated this moment where connection groups are meeting in different ways. Some are meeting together, some are meeting online, some are hybrid. You've all had to make those decisions, but you've loved each other really well, and you've laid down a lot of your preference for the sake of the body. And this church is unified because of those decisions that you guys are making. And we're really thankful for that, and it's been fun to watch you do that. The next thing I wanted to talk about is our equipping ministry, which I think is one of the most exciting things going on in the life of our church right now, because of the faith that I'm getting to see in the people that are participating in that ministry. And it's actually changed my faith. It's given me courage and faith in the middle of this moment to watch the way that people have invested in their faith and wanted to grow in relationship to Jesus. So even to just look at what equipping ministry has looked like in our church, about a year ago, we did some equipping things. So we would have a periodic men's gathering or women's gathering, but there wasn't really a discernible direction that we were going, and we weren't really certain what those were for and what we were working towards. And part of that is because I think by the grace of God and some of the growth that we've been able to see, we've felt like we've been playing catch up throughout the life of our church. Of a lot of people come, and we've just been trying to figure out how to maintain that growth. But one of the things that has happened in this moment is in COVID, we've slowed down and have said, okay, we have this church body. Now, what does it look like for us to develop into something intentionally that we want to be? What does it look like to grow in a similar direction together? And I think one of the ideas that I've been really encouraged by is that discipleship is the Great Commission. And so when we talk a lot about the Great Commission, and usually what we mean by that is evangelism and people who don't know Jesus coming to know Jesus, and that absolutely is the Great Commission. But what does Jesus say in the Great Commission? That he wants us to teach people to obey all the things that he's commanded us, and that he'll be with us to the end of the age. What does that mean? He wants people not to just be converts, but to be disciples who are emulating his life on the earth. That is the Great Commission. And so that is what we're after in equipping. And so equipping is one of the primary purposes of our church, is to help people become disciples of Jesus. And one cool story, I'm going to shout you out, Sammy, if you're watching this. I think this is a great example of that. Sammy is somebody who came to Salt Company, our college ministry, came to know Jesus, was baptized, and then since then has been growing like a weed. And we've had conversations together where she's asked me what books to read, how to follow Jesus. And Sammy has jumped into our equipping ministry and now is in a small group where she's learning what it means to follow him. And so that whole process is the Great Commission. Not only that moment that Sammy decided to follow Jesus, but everything that Jesus has done in her life since. And so the heart of equipping is I'm getting the opportunity to dream about what we want our church to be in the future, and what it would look like for us as disciples of Jesus to walk around this city as little Christs. And what is the way that he has uniquely given us an opportunity to love this city and to demonstrate him to the world. And so equipping is taking that dream and trying to work backwards and say, okay, how do we intentionally work towards becoming those types of people? And one of the things that we believe is that we can't totally control who we become. That's what God does. But we can be a part of becoming that person. And we can make decisions to try to become who Jesus wants us to be. And so that dream of who we want to become is kind of how we've tried to answer that question partially as a church, is what we call our marks of a disciple, which are marks of a disciple. We want to be disciples who know how to be with Jesus, be like Jesus, and do what Jesus did. So be with Jesus is, think John 15, that we know how to abide in Christ, that we know how to live before the face of God, like live in his presence, not just have a quiet time and leave, but know how to live in his presence throughout the day. Be like Jesus, that we can put off sin and put on the fruit of the Spirit. And then do what Jesus did. Think Great Commission, which I just talked about, but also think Great Command. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. So we want to be people who know how to practically love and serve our neighbors and practically love and serve the city. Not only believe in Christ sort of theoretically or theologically, but practically in the way that we live. And so we're trying to work towards those things. And so we're just taking baby steps towards that right now. But the baby steps have been really exciting. So we had over 40 people sign up for the first equipping class that we ever had as a church. And then from that, we had people jump into what's called a small group intensive, which is a 5-week small group studying one of those marks of a disciple. And so, for example, we'll have one tomorrow night where we'll get together and we'll use this tool called Rule of Life, which is where we try to design our entire lives around being like Jesus and living with him. And people will kind of troubleshoot that rule of life together. They'll talk about what's going well, what's not going well, and try to learn from each other on how to follow Jesus. And we'll read articles where we'll learn more about that. And then they'll leave, and they'll be in like a group text thread where they'll be holding each other accountable and praying for each other. And so it's coming together to help each other look like Jesus. And it's been really fun. And there's actually a waiting list for those small groups. So we're doing another small group after this one because enough people wanted to sign up for that. And there's a lot more to come, God willing. We've got a several-year plan of things we would love to do. But the thing to keep on your radar, if you're interested, is towards the end of March, we'll have another equipping class. We'll be announcing that at Salt City. And equipping is for anyone who wants in and wants to grow as a disciple of Jesus, but specifically members. You guys really are who our church is. And if we're talking about who we want our church to become, then you guys need to be a part of that. And so I want to invite you to consider that equipping. But we've just been blown away by the faith and the response that people have had, and we're thankful for you guys participating in that.
Yeah. So now, thanks so much, Jordan. That's awesome. I'm so excited about Jordan's emerging role, and I think for the first time in my own soul, I'm just as excited about something that's happening on the Salt City end of our church as I have been about our Salt Company ministry. And that hasn't always been the case. You know, we're a church family that loves college students, and Jordan's really putting feet on this reality that we're a church that loves the Twin Cities. And so now we're going to do a little bit of camera magic, and I'm going to be replaced in this seat by Hannah Thompson, and we're going to hear an update about what's going on in the life of Salt Company, our college ministry, both at University of Minnesota and at St. Thomas.
All right, guys, so we're going to transition to the Salt Company update. And there's a reason why I'm doing this instead of Drake Epkiss, who is our Salt Company director, is because Paige is pregnant and potentially in labor right now. I haven't heard for sure, so don't hold me to that. But if not in labor currently, baby Epkiss should be coming very soon. So be praying for that. So I'm going to give a little update here with Hannah. And I'll let Hannah kind of introduce herself and talk about what she's been seeing in Salt Company this year. But on behalf of Drake, just wanted to give a couple thoughts. So I remember about a year ago, almost to the day, talking to our leaders about something that I felt like I'd been sensing from God as far as, okay, we've grown a lot within Salt Company, and we've added a lot of people to this ministry, which, by the way, if you're new, Salt Company is the college ministry of Salt City Church, meeting weekly, a big part of what we do. But I remember looking at our leaders and saying, like, we're thankful for the growth, but I really want us to grow in the depth of our walk with Jesus. And I want us to start to understand who we want to become as a ministry long term and what it would look like to increase in the depth of who we are as disciples of Christ. And God answered that prayer just in ways that I didn't expect him to, and it was through COVID. And what happened in COVID is it challenged our student leaders in a way that they hadn't been challenged before, but God developed their character in really cool ways. And I think the character and depth of Salt Company as a whole and commitment to the church and life with Christ in a way that wouldn't have been able to happen without the circumstances that they've walked through. And it's been a crazy year for our Salt staff. I remember over the summer not even knowing if we'd be able to meet as Salt Company in person and wondering what we were going to do. But God provided a way for us to keep meeting as Salt Company, to gather, to worship Jesus and hear teaching from the Word. And people have met Jesus. A lot of the things that have happened in the past in Salt Company have continued. And I think he's added just depth to people's walk with Christ. And that was evidence in our Salt staff did check-ins with our leaders recently to just kind of see how they're doing. And one of the themes from our leaders was that they're learning new rhythms of walking with Jesus. They're figuring out how to slow down and to live life with him in a more intentional way. And they feel like they've actually grown through this stretch. And so God answered that prayer. So I think Hannah's got some stories about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Hannah Thompson, and I'm on Salt Company staff at the University of St. Thomas in Sault Ste. Paul. And one of my favorite parts about this year has been watching God create that depth in our leaders. And when I think about our ministry happens through God changing people. And so I want to share with you guys two stories that have been really encouraging to me. And the first one is about one of our student leaders at Sault Ste. Paul. Her name is Michaela, and she is a senior at the University of St. Thomas this year. she was loosely involved in college ministry and church throughout her time at St. Thomas, and really jumped into Salt Company for the first time this past spring. And last fall, she was kind of involved in a connection group and studied abroad, and then had to come home and started tuning into Salt Company. And then come April, decided to apply for student leadership by just DMing someone who was a past leader. And Colin and I met with her virtually for her student leadership interview. We were excited about what God was doing in her life and decided to bring her on to our leadership team. And the first time I actually met Michaela in person was in July. It wasn't until July that I actually got to meet her. And even though I'd been praying for her, and this year have gotten to see God really create a lot of depth and maturity in her faith. This is the first time that she has really been surrounded by Christian community that has been challenging her and encouraging her to confess her sin and to grow in trusting God, and has just really matured her in some sweet ways. And we were kind of celebrating together in her check-in that this is the first semester that she hasn't struggled with things that she struggled with for the rest of her college career. So she's not drinking, she's not partying, she has healthy relationships and boundaries with guys, and is surrounded by people who love her, and God is giving her really sweet opportunities to share her faith with people who aren't believers in her life, including her friends and in her family. And so it's been a really great privilege for me to get to walk with Michaela. She's a sweet friend of mine now, and so it's just been such a blessing to get to know her and to watch God at work virtually, and then fold into my life someone who is really dear to me now. So Michaela is the first story. The second story is another student leader on the U of M side, and his name is Josh. And if you remember when we baptized people in the spring on Easter in their homes, in their bathtubs, by their family, Josh was one of the 3 people who got baptized. He's a student. And Josh is an awesome guy. He's a funny guy. And this year we have also heard in his check-in that those rhythms that Jordan was talking about, God has been really helping him pursue faithfulness in his walk with him. And Josh has started praying through scripture. And when he has felt the opportunity or the temptation to be nervous or anxious about what's going on, he told Drake in his check-in that he has been just speaking truth over himself and praying, and that's become a normal rhythm to him because of those daily rhythms that he has started in the Word of God. And so we love what God has been doing this last semester. Although it's been crazy and not what we would have anticipated, God is totally at work, and those are just 2 examples of many, but God has really blessed us in this season. It's been such a special season to be a part of this ministry.
Yeah, just want to end this section by asking you to pray for our Salt Company students and staff. If you've got a prayer list, add them to that prayer list, and specifically pray for endurance as they walk through this stretch in their life. Help them to see that God's hand is in this and he's working in their life. And just support them through prayer.
All right, thanks for joining us and praying for Salt Company. I always love hearing the update about what's going on in the life of Salt Company, and it's always exciting for us to hear that God is changing the lives of people in the next generation. So now I want to do something that is going to be exciting for some of you, and some of you are like, I don't care about the financial update. You're in one of 2 camps. You're either really excited when I say financial update, or you're not excited. But I'm excited because I remember thinking when COVID happened, the stock market's tanking, and everybody's a doomsday predictor, and we're all just kind of freaking out. And I just am excited that we have nothing to freak out about. God has supplied all of our needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. I remember that was one of the first texts that God gave me when we were planting Salt City, that he would provide for our needs. And COVID hasn't stopped that. And I really feel grateful for our church body, because in a severe test of affliction, we have been overwhelmed by your generosity. So thank you so much for being all in, for giving sacrificially in a time of personal uncertainty. I felt that with my own family, and I know all of you have felt that with your own families, not knowing what the future holds and feeling like, man, maybe you lost money in the stock market, or maybe your job was in question at some point. And you guys have continued to give. And let me give some numbers to that. So last year, in the year 2019, we had $543,000 given to our general fund, which equals out to about $45,000 a month. And in 2020, given all of the instability and uncertainty, we had $621,000 given to our general fund, which equals out to about $52,000 a month. And because of your generosity, we have been able to keep all of our full-time staff in place. We've been able to increase some roles of some part-time staff who have been carrying a lot of the administrative load. So I want to give a shout out to Jennifer Tuttle and say thank you so much for your generous service to our church. She's been putting together the COVID preparedness plans. She's been making contact with organizations that we've been partnering with, such as Urban Homeworks, where we've been able to help people who are in crisis with their housing. We've been able to fix up those houses so that people can move into affordable housing. We've been able to deepen our partnership with Sheridan Story and feed elementary and middle school kids who had food insecurity, and we've been able to give generously to them. You all know that we've been partnering with New Life Family Services, and people who are in crisis in pregnancy basically tripled their crisis with COVID, and we were able to support by giving diapers and giving gift cards and giving money to support women who were pregnant and who were in crisis and who were considering abortion, but New Life has been giving them an alternative option, and we were excited to be able to partner with them in that. And then we were also able to continue to support Clinton Miranda Robinson, who are missionaries who were formerly in East Asia and now are moving to Thailand, a different country in East Asia, and we're able to continue to support them. And so what your generosity has allowed us to do is, in the midst of a crisis, to not only be able to meet our needs, meaning pay our staff and pay our bills, including our office space, and being able to meet online, meaning buying more equipment that we needed to be able to pull off live streaming, and also paying now for our regular weekly services. But we were able to be an outward-focused church. As a 3-year-old church plant, a baby church, when a huge crisis came our way, we were able to be outward-focused, and people were able to serve our community, and we just were able to taste being salt and light, which, man, wow. Thank you so much, guys. Like, we didn't just talk about doing something, we did something as a church. And it might seem like it was an insignificant impact, or is an insignificant impact that we're making, but I really believe it was that mustard seed of faith, and that God is going to continue to grow a beautiful tree in our midst that we're going to be able to stand back someday and say, that was the start of it, but God did something significant then in our souls, and sort of that down payment that we made, he's now honoring with super growth. So those are kind of the things that have happened and are happening in the life of our church. So you might be asking, okay, what are you guys excited about for the future? And I think what I'm excited about is not that I know what's going to happen. I think I've learned to say, I don't know what's going to happen. But I think what I'm excited about is that people are continuing to tune in online. People are continuing to come in person. People are vitally involved in our Connection Groups ministry. People are vitally involved in our Equippings ministry. People are vitally involved in Salt Company. And this crisis hasn't been able to stop that. And so there's sort of a ... If even a crisis can't stop that, what happens when the crisis begins to lift? And what I'm dreaming about is not relaunching Salt City Church. What I'm dreaming about is replanting Salt City Church. And so the person I really want to reach out to right now is the person who feels shame about how they've personally reacted to the crisis. Maybe you've been dealing with more anxiety than you thought. Maybe you haven't tuned into the live stream like you thought you should have. Maybe you haven't been to as many in-person gatherings. Maybe you haven't loved your neighbor the way that you've wanted to. And I'm just saying, hey, welcome back. Salt City Church is a church for you. And what I'm looking forward to is leaving what's behind us, and pressing on to what God has for us in the future. And what I'm passionate about is picking up the pieces of brokenness in this city and on these campuses and saying, we know the one who can heal you. It's not our church that can heal you. It's Jesus who can heal you. And so I look forward to being the hands and feet of Jesus. I do look forward to when we can meet together without masks, when we can be uninhibited. But I don't think that my dream for our church is focused as much on numbers or on doing what we used to do, but it's with what God has been doing in us to come back together and being the church. And one of the actually images that continues to resonate in my mind is I think I look forward to the time where we can be together and just be feasting together. And so one of the plans that has just come to fruition, honestly, is just when we can, it'll almost be like a preview of heaven, but I'm imagining, Jennifer Tuttle, all the logistical people are probably going to kill me on this one, but it's like where there's just like a long table, like everyone in our church is sitting at it, just like a really, really long table. And I know that probably can't happen, but this long table that we're all sitting at and we're looking back and there's some regrets and all that, but what we're mostly doing is just celebrating that Jesus has empowered us to get through what we've been through, and that becomes the launching point for just a forward gaze. And what we're asking God to do as we replant Salt City in the future, whenever that happens, is we're saying, do it again, Jesus. Just do it again. Like, we've already seen that you can do this. And so it's like planting a church with more staff, more money, more people, more momentum, more excitement, and more faith. And so I'm inviting you to be all in on that. And really the first step for us tonight is just to go into a time of prayer together. And so I want to invite you to click on that link that's showing up below the video or on the screen and just join us on this Zoom call. And what we're doing is very simple. We're praying, oh God, please do it again. Your kingdom come now in my life. Would I be a more forgiving, more thankful, more humble person who is loving and following after Jesus, who's not outraged, but sharing the gospel with my neighbors and continuing to be vitally involved in the church? Would you give me strength to do that? And then would you lift the burden of sort of controlling the world from me, and would your kingdom come? Join us in praying. We'll break out into small groups, super low key. We'll pray for 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll watch God work throughout this next semester together. Thanks for joining us.